Because there is no good time to talk about Mr. Epstein and all things associated. We've been talking to Newsnight for about 6 months about doing something around the work that I was doing. And unfortunately, we've just not been able to fit it into either your schedule or my schedule until now. And actually, it's a very good opportunity, and I'm delighted to be able to see you today.
A DNA test just destroyed Prince Andrew's life forever. What palace investigators found will leave you speechless. For over 40 years, he kept this hidden. A secret son, a covered-up affair, lies that went all the way to the top. But science doesn't lie, and the results are absolutely shocking. Buckingham Palace tried to bury this, but the truth has finally exploded into the open.
Firstly, I think I must and want, for the record, to refer to the events that have taken place in the last few weeks. And I've just wished to reiterate and to reaffirm the statements which have already been made on my behalf by Buckingham Palace.
King Charles is furious, Prince William is demanding answers, and what happens next will change the royal family forever. You won't believe what they're hiding. Before we dive into the details of this confirmation, it's important to understand the context in which this news has emerged. The royal family is currently facing pressure from what insiders are describing as an extensive restructuring plan being led by Prince William. According to sources with knowledge of the situation, this plan focuses heavily on reforming the financial operations of the monarchy. The proposed changes would include cutting off titles and financial support for any family members who are deemed inappropriate or damaging to the institution's reputation. This restructuring effort comes at a time when the monarchy is trying to present itself as modern, accountable, and streamlined under the leadership of King Charles III. The goal appears to be creating a slimmer, more efficient royal family that can maintain public trust and support in the 21st century. However, the latest controversy surrounding Prince Andrew threatens to undermine all of that careful work. The confirmation that has just been released is truly historic in nature. For the first time, Buckingham Palace has publicly acknowledged that a senior member of the royal family is the father of a child born outside of any recognized relationship. The statement itself was brief, but its implications are enormous. According to the palace, DNA testing has definitively established that Prince Andrew is the biological father of an individual who, until now, has remained outside the public eye and unknown to most of the world. This acknowledgement comes after months of intense speculation and mounting legal pressure. For years, rumors had circulated in various corners of the internet and in certain publications, but they lacked the concrete evidence needed to break into mainstream coverage. However, those whispers eventually grew louder, and what was once dismissed as tabloid fantasy has now been proven to be fact through scientific testing. The timing of this revelation could hardly be worse for Prince Andrew. The Duke of York already had a reputation that was severely damaged, largely due to his association with Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender who died in prison. Epstein's crimes and the network of powerful individuals connected to him became one of the biggest scandals of recent years, and Prince Andrew's friendship with him raised serious questions about his judgment and character. Then came the interview. In November of 2019, Prince Andrew sat down for what would become an infamous conversation with BBC Newsnight. The interview was intended to clear his name and address the allegations surrounding his connection to Epstein. Instead, it became a public relations disaster. Critics and viewers found his explanations unconvincing, his demeanor troubling, and his lack of empathy for Epstein's victims deeply concerning. The fallout was swift and severe. Following that interview, Prince Andrew was effectively removed from public life. He stepped back from royal duties, lost his military associations, and saw his royal patronages stripped away. The Queen's second son, once a working member of the family who represented the monarchy at various events, became essentially persona non grata. He retreated from the public eye, and the palace hoped that the controversy would eventually fade. But now, with this DNA confirmation, Prince Andrew faces yet another crisis, one that strikes at the very heart of royal identity and legitimacy. The individual at the center of this story has lived their entire life with questions about their parentage. According to reports, this person never sought fame or public attention. Their goal was simply to know the truth about where they came from, to have confirmation of something they had long suspected or been told in private. The identity of this individual was carefully protected throughout the legal process that led to the DNA testing. What we know is that they are a private citizen who approached this matter through proper legal channels rather than through the media. Their request was straightforward. They wanted Prince Andrew to submit to a DNA test that would either confirm or deny that he was their biological father. For someone to have lived for decades with uncertainty about such a fundamental aspect of their identity is a deeply personal struggle. According to sources familiar with the case, this individual had been wrestling with questions about their father's identity for most of their life. The confirmation they sought was not about claiming royal titles or accessing wealth. It was about understanding their own story, their own heritage, and having answers to questions that had haunted them. The DNA test results that have now been confirmed are described by those with knowledge of the scientific process as mathematically irrefutable. The testing was conducted using the most rigorous standards available, and the results leave no possibility for denial or alternative explanations. This presents King Charles III with an enormous challenge, one that goes to the very core of what the Windsor dynasty represents and how it maintains its position in British society. The implications of this confirmation are vast and complex. Royal experts and constitutional scholars are now grappling with questions that have rarely, if ever, needed to be addressed in modern times. What does this mean for the concept of royal lineage in an age when DNA testing can prove biological relationships beyond any doubt? How does the monarchy handle a situation where a member of the royal family has a child who is kept secret, whether intentionally or through circumstance? Prince Andrew's position was already precarious before this news broke. He had been marginalized within the family, cut off from the roles and responsibilities he once held, but he still retained his title as Duke of York, and he remained a member of the royal family, even if he was no longer a working representative of it. This new revelation threatens even that diminished status. The confirmation also raises uncomfortable questions about accountability and responsibility. If Prince Andrew is indeed the biological father of this individual, what obligations does he have toward them? What role, if any, should this person have in relation to the royal family? And how does the monarchy as an institution respond to a situation that challenges traditional notions of legitimacy and inheritance? For King Charles and Prince William, this situation represents a nightmare scenario. They have been working to restore public confidence in the monarchy, to demonstrate that it can be responsible and relevant in modern Britain. They have taken steps to address past controversies and to show that the institution is willing to change and adapt. But this revelation about Prince Andrew pulls the family back into scandal and forces them to confront questions about secrecy, privilege, and the consequences of actions taken decades ago. The British public, which has watched the royal family navigate various crises over the years, now faces yet another chapter in an ongoing saga of controversy surrounding Prince Andrew. Many people had already formed negative opinions about him based on his association with Epstein and his poorly received interview. This DNA confirmation adds another layer to that damaged reputation and raises new questions about his character and his treatment of those connected to him. The story of how this scandal emerged into public view didn't happen overnight. Like many major revelations involving powerful figures, it began as whispers, faint and unsubstantiated, circulating in places where rumors tend to gather before they either fade away or explode into confirmed facts. For years, there had been fragmented reports and unproven claims floating around on internet forums and in certain publications known for sensational coverage. These whispers spoke of a hidden child fathered by a high-ranking member of the royal family. But without concrete evidence, these rumors remained confined to the margins of public discourse. The nature of such rumors is that they often lack the credibility needed to break into mainstream media coverage. Responsible news organizations require verification, sources, and evidence before they publish stories that could destroy reputations or upend institutions. So for a long time, these claims about a secret royal child existed in a kind of gray area, talked about by some but dismissed by many as nothing more than conspiracy theories or tabloid invention. The internet has become a breeding ground for such speculation, where anyone can post theories and connect dots that may or may not actually form a coherent picture. However, in the years following Prince Andrew's withdrawal from public life, something began to shift. The rumors that had been vague and directionless started to coalesce around him specifically as the central figure in this alleged secret. The timing made sense to those who were paying attention. Prince Andrew had already fallen dramatically from grace. His association with Jeffrey Epstein had been thoroughly documented and examined. His interview on Newsnight had been dissected and criticized from every possible angle. The public had already been conditioned to believe that there might be more troubling revelations waiting to be uncovered. The circumstances surrounding his loss of position and favor created what you might call a perfect environment for suspicion to flourish. When someone's reputation has already been severely damaged by confirmed scandals, it becomes easier for people to believe that additional scandals might be hidden. The public had seen the evidence of his poor judgment, his questionable associations, and his inability to adequately address serious allegations. All of this prepared the ground for further speculation about what else might be concealed behind palace walls. Over the past 2 years, according to observers who tracked the evolution of this story, the rumor began to gain considerable momentum. Amateur investigators on the internet, the kind of people who dedicate significant time and energy to researching and piecing together publicly available information, started assembling what they believed were clues. They dug up old photographs from the 1980s, some of them grainy and unclear, but suggestive to those looking for patterns. They found accounts and descriptions of Prince Andrew's social life during his time in the Royal Navy, piecing together partially remembered details from people who claimed to have known him or known of his activities during that period. Some people who had previously worked in palace-adjacent positions, whether for the royal household itself or for organizations connected to it, allegedly made cryptic remarks that seemed to hint at secrets being kept. These comments, often vague and never explicitly naming names or providing concrete details, nonetheless fed into the growing narrative. Online communities dedicated to royal watching and to uncovering hidden truths about powerful figures began developing theories. They created timelines, attempting to match up dates and locations, building a narrative that described a brief relationship and a subsequent arrangement designed to keep any resulting child away from royal life. The construction of these theories involved a lot of speculation and dot connecting that may or may not have been based on solid evidence. But the sheer volume of discussion and the dedication of those pursuing these theories meant that the story couldn't remain completely underground forever. The press, which had initially been hesitant to touch such unverified claims, began to take notice as the online conversation became increasingly difficult to ignore. Journalists and media outlets found themselves in a delicate position. On one hand, they had professional and ethical obligations not to publish unsubstantiated rumors that could unfairly damage reputations. On the other hand, when a significant portion of the public is discussing something persistently, and when the subject of those discussions is already a figure of public controversy, there's an argument that the conversation itself becomes newsworthy, even if the underlying claims haven't been proven. Some publications began to test the waters, publishing articles that were carefully framed as questions rather than statements of fact. Headlines appeared asking whether there was truth to the rumors, or wondering whether a royal secret was about to be revealed. These pieces were tentative by design, acknowledging the speculative nature of the claims, while still bringing them into the mainstream conversation. The articles would typically review the rumors that were circulating online, present the lack of concrete evidence, note the palace's refusal to comment, and leave readers to draw their own conclusions. Even these carefully worded articles added fuel to the fire of speculation. Every time a respectable news outlet mentioned the rumors, even in the context of questioning them or noting their unverified status, it lent them a degree of legitimacy they hadn't previously possessed. The palace's response to these articles was consistent: no comment. This is a standard palace approach to many rumors and stories. The official position has long been that the royal family doesn't dignify baseless speculation with responses, operating on the principle that engaging with every rumor would only encourage more of them. But in this particular situation, that traditional strategy of silence became problematic. As Dr. Anna Whitelock, a respected royal historian, pointed out in recent commentary, the monarchy has always been vulnerable to questions about legitimacy and lineage. These issues are fundamental to the entire concept of hereditary monarchy. The institution's claim to authority rests on bloodlines and succession, so any questions about who is related to whom and under what circumstances strike at the very foundation of royal power. Dr. Whitelock noted that the old palace strategy of never complaining and never explaining made sense in an earlier era, when the royal family had much more control over what information reached the public. But in the age of social media and instant global communication, that approach has become a liability. When the palace says nothing in response to persistent rumors, many people no longer interpret that silence as dignified restraint. Instead, they see it as an implicit admission that there's something being hidden, something the palace doesn't want to address because doing so would confirm uncomfortable truths. This interpretation of silence as concealment allowed the speculation to spread and evolve. In the absence of official denial or clarification, the theories became more elaborate and, for many people, more convincing. The narrative that developed online and in certain media circles painted a picture of a cover-up, of arrangements made decades ago to hide an inconvenient truth, of payments made to ensure silence, and of a child raised without knowing their true heritage. Then, approximately 8 months ago, the situation transformed fundamentally. What had been an anonymous swirl of rumors and speculation suddenly became a concrete legal matter. Someone stepped forward, not through a tabloid exclusive or a media interview, but through formal legal channels. This individual made an official claim that they were Prince Andrew's biological child and formally requested that he submit to DNA testing to substantiate or disprove this claim. The identity of this person was vigorously protected during the initial stages of this process. Their legal team ensured that their privacy was maintained while they pursued what they argued was a basic human right, the right to know one's own parentage. The legal filing represented a turning point because it moved the entire matter out of the realm of speculation and into the realm of verifiable fact. A DNA test could provide a definitive answer, one way or another. This legal action couldn't be dismissed or ignored in the way that internet rumors could be. Once formal legal proceedings were initiated, the palace and Prince Andrew himself had to respond through their own legal representatives. The matter was now in the court system, subject to legal procedures and requirements. The whisper that had grown steadily louder over months and years had finally become a roar that demanded an official response. The royal family, which had successfully ignored speculation for so long, now faced a situation where silence was no longer an option. The individual at the center of this extraordinary situation turned out to be quite different from what many observers had expected. Rather than someone seeking attention or attempting to leverage royal connections for personal gain, the person who came forward proved to be a respectable and reserved professional with no previous connection to the world of aristocracy or high society. Alexander Campbell, a 42-year-old architect working out of Edinburgh, had built a successful life and career entirely outside of the public spotlight. Mr. Campbell was raised by a single mother and managed to establish himself in his profession through his own efforts and abilities. According to court records and statements from people close to him, his pursuit of the truth about his paternity was not driven by desires for titles, fortune, or public recognition. Instead, it stemmed from a deeply personal need to understand his own identity and heritage. His mother had always been evasive when asked about his father's identity, and this absence of information had left him with a sense of incompleteness that persisted throughout his life. The catalyst for his legal action came in the form of a deathbed confession. Reports indicate that his mother, who had worked for a charitable organization during her career, passed away 2 years ago. During the final days of her life, she revealed to her son that she had experienced a brief but significant relationship with Prince Andrew in the early 1980s, before his marriage to Sarah Ferguson. According to what she told Alexander, she discovered she was pregnant, and a private arrangement was subsequently made. This arrangement allegedly involved a modest financial payment in exchange for her silence, and an agreement that her son would be raised away from any connection to the royal family. This revelation set Alexander Campbell on a difficult but necessary journey. He needed to verify whether his mother's words were true and to establish his own identity with certainty. According to statements released by his legal representatives at the law firm Thompson & Finch, Mr. Campbell initially attempted to reach out to representatives of the Duke of York through private channels. He hoped to handle the matter discreetly, perhaps out of respect for all parties involved, or simply because he preferred to avoid the media circus that would inevitably follow if the matter became public. However, these private attempts at communication were met with complete silence. His discreet overtures were ignored, receiving no acknowledgement or response from anyone connected to Prince Andrew. Faced with this wall of non-response, Mr. Campbell's legal team made the decision to pursue formal legal action. They filed a case based on what they argued was a fundamental human right, the right to know one's own parentage and biological heritage. A person close to Mr. Campbell provided insight into his motivations, explaining that this was never about ambition or material gain. It was about finding resolution to a question that had haunted him for more than 40 years. The source asked people to imagine living with such a significant gap in the story of one's own life for such a long period of time. Mr. Campbell felt an obligation both to himself and to the memory of his mother to pursue a definitive answer. In many ways, the fear of discovering that the claim was true was just as frightening as the possibility of learning it was false. When the legal action became known to the media, journalists began investigating every aspect of Alexander Campbell's life, looking for scandal or inconsistency that might undermine his claim or reveal ulterior motives. What they found instead was the portrait of a man who was kind, intelligent, and quite private. His colleagues and friends described someone who respected boundaries and conducted himself with integrity. This picture stood in stark contrast to the chaos and controversy surrounding the claims, and it lent his case a credibility that made it difficult for the public to dismiss. His reluctance to engage with the media only increased the perceived authenticity of his motivations. Unlike many people who find themselves at the center of major news stories, Mr. Campbell did not seek out interviews or attempt to tell his story publicly. He maintained his privacy and allowed his legal team to handle the matter through proper channels. This restraint suggested someone who genuinely wanted answers rather than attention. The request for DNA testing created an unprecedented dilemma for Buckingham Palace. Prince Andrew already had a reputation as a damaging liability to the royal family. He had been essentially removed from any public-facing role within the institution. His official duties had been stripped away, and his patronages had been cancelled. Under King Charles III, the royal family had been working diligently to minimize damage and present an image of a modernized, accountable, and more streamlined monarchy. The DNA allegation threatened to undo all of that careful work. This wasn't a matter of financial misconduct or an embarrassing mistake during a royal engagement. This was a scandal involving bloodlines, legacy, and alleged betrayal, with the potential to permanently damage the Windsor reputation. The tension within royal circles was reportedly intense. According to insiders, a series of crisis meetings were held, attended by the King, the Prince of Wales, and senior advisors from the Lord Chamberlain's office. The central question these meetings needed to address was how to respond appropriately. Refusing to take the test would likely be interpreted worldwide as an admission of guilt, a public relations catastrophe that would confirm the public's worst suspicions about the royal family's willingness to hide uncomfortable truths. However, agreeing to the test meant surrendering control and potentially opening the door to a reality that could be devastating. Valentine Lowe, a royal reporter and author with extensive experience covering the monarchy, observed that the dilemma facing the palace was immense. On one side, the monarchy has a natural instinct to protect itself and its members from public scrutiny. On the other side, both King Charles and Prince William were acutely aware that the institution's survival depends on maintaining public trust. Given Prince Andrew's history and the damage already done to his reputation, it was crucial that the palace not appear to be obstructing a legitimate search for truth. Prince Andrew himself reportedly insisted initially on denying the claim, viewing the demand for testing as an invasion of his privacy and another attack on his already damaged reputation. However, he faced considerable pressure from the king and from legal experts advising the royal family. They warned that the consequences of a prolonged court battle to avoid the test would be far more destructive than simply taking the test itself, regardless of what the results might show. Eventually, the decision was made to cooperate with the testing process, but only under the strictest possible conditions. The entire procedure would be conducted with a level of secrecy and precision comparable to a state security operation. The goal was to establish an unquestionable chain of custody for the DNA samples, ensuring that the results would be beyond reproach no matter what they revealed. The actual collection and testing of DNA samples took place far from the prying eyes of the global media. The Sterling Genetics Institute in Geneva, Switzerland, was selected for this crucial task. This wasn't a typical commercial testing facility. It was chosen specifically for its independence, its excellent international reputation, and its distance from the British media environment. The Institute's location in Switzerland also provided a degree of legal and jurisdictional separation from the UK. The process of collecting the samples was meticulously planned and executed. Prince Andrew's sample was collected at a secured royal residence, witnessed by an independent medical officer, an attorney from Mr. Campbell's legal team, and Prince Andrew's own legal counsel. Every step of the process was documented and secured. Alexander Campbell underwent a similar procedure in Edinburgh, with equivalent safeguards and documentation. After collection, the sealed samples were transported to Geneva by secure diplomatic courier. Their movement was tracked continuously using a detailed chain of custody log that recorded every minute of the journey. This level of security ensured that there could be no allegations of tampering or sample switching. At the Sterling Institute, the samples underwent a procedure called short tandem repeat analysis, commonly known as STR analysis. This is considered the gold standard for paternity testing. The process involves examining specific regions of DNA that contain repetitive patterns. Every person inherits half of these genetic markers from their mother and half from their father. By comparing the STR markers of a child with those of a potential father, scientists can determine with extraordinary precision whether a biological relationship exists. A scientist not involved in this particular case explained that a standard paternity test typically analyzes approximately 21 STR markers. If the suspected father is indeed the biological father, the child's paternal markers will match his across all examined markers. When this matching occurs across all tested markers, the probability of paternity typically exceeds 99.99%, which for all legal and practical purposes is considered conclusive proof. The technicians working at the Swiss laboratory were required to sign legally binding non-disclosure agreements. They understood that they weren't simply processing routine samples. They were handling information that could alter the course of a nation's royal history. In the sterile, white-walled laboratory, computers processed the analysis of genetic code that had been stripped of all royal mystique and reduced to pure data. After the comparison was completed and probabilities were calculated, a separate team performed cross-verification of the findings to ensure accuracy. The final report was not transmitted by email or uploaded to any server. Following the strict protocols that had been established, a single hard copy was produced, signed by the laboratory director, and placed in a tamper-proof envelope. That envelope, containing straightforward scientific findings, carried more authority than any royal proclamation. It was flown back to London and hand-delivered to a select group of pre-chosen royal legal advisors and a court representative. Inside that document lay the fate of Prince Andrew's legacy and a crucial chapter in the monarchy's history. The moment of truth arrived quietly in a sealed room at St. James's Palace. Present were the King's private secretary, the Duke of York's principal lawyer, and an independent official. The envelope from the Sterling Institute was opened in silence. According to someone who attended the meeting, the atmosphere was tense as the single sheet of paper was read. The document used appropriate clinical and scientific language, but its findings were devastatingly clear. The STR analysis had found a match between Prince Andrew and Alexander Campbell, resulting in a paternity probability of 99.999%. The confirmation was swift and unambiguous. There was no room for doubt, error, or denial. What had been rumor and speculation was now established fact. Mr. Campbell's legal team received the legally required disclosure, giving Buckingham Palace less than 24 hours to prepare a response. After that revelation, everyone involved understood that the information would inevitably reach the public. A crisis communications team worked through the night in what was described as a chaotic situation, attempting to craft a brief but authoritative statement that would acknowledge the facts without opening the door to further scandal. The statement was released the following day at 6 o'clock in the evening. Although it consisted of just 2 lines, its impact was explosive. The palace confirmed that all parties had obtained and received the results of the court-ordered DNA analysis, and that the investigation had established a biological link between the Duke of York and Alexander Campbell. Within moments, internet traffic surged dramatically. The phrase biological link became a global trending topic, rising to the top of social media platforms within minutes. News outlets around the world interrupted their scheduled programming with breaking news alerts about the royal bombshell and the confirmation of Prince Andrew's secret son. Large crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, drawn by curiosity and a desire to witness history unfolding. The gathering included British citizens and tourists, many of whom expressed strong emotions ranging from shock to vindication to righteous anger. One woman speaking to a BBC reporter said that everyone had suspected something like this all along. Even after everything that had already come to light about Prince Andrew, there was a sense that more remained hidden. She added that the cover-up itself was perhaps the worst aspect of the entire situation. The following morning, Prince Andrew's spokesperson issued a statement on his behalf. The response was a textbook example of detached formality, but it only served to increase public dissatisfaction and anger. The statement read that he accepted the findings of the recently conducted DNA testing, but characterized the matter as a private family issue that would be dealt with privately with the assistance of all involved parties. The statement concluded by saying that no further comments would be made. The public reaction to this statement was swift and overwhelmingly negative. Many people focused on the phrase private matter and criticized it as tone-deaf and inappropriate. Critics argued that the statement was cold, heartless, and devoid of any acknowledgement of responsibility or expression of regret. Prince Andrew had ended the conversation with scientific confirmation, but without any apology to his son for being absent throughout his childhood. There was no expression of remorse for the secrecy, no acknowledgement of the pain that might have been caused, and no indication of any desire to build a relationship moving forward. Mark Borkowski, a crisis management and public relations specialist, described the statement as a catastrophic error in judgment. He explained that the public had no desire for overly legalistic language or bureaucratic detachment. What people wanted to see was humanity, a father acknowledging a truth of profound significance and taking some measure of responsibility for it. Instead, by retreating behind palace walls and legal terminology, Prince Andrew reinforced his reputation as someone pompous, cold, and completely out of touch with how ordinary people think and feel. Within days of the confirmation, the consequences began to manifest rapidly and severely. Prince Andrew's already ruined reputation suffered what many observers described as a final, fatal blow. Petitions calling for him to be stripped of his remaining title, the Dukedom of York, gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures. Politicians from various parties and other prominent public figures demanded his complete removal from the line of succession. Some went further, arguing that he should be stripped of all remaining privileges and financial support from the royal family. According to insiders, the mood within the royal family itself was one of fury and profound distress. King Charles was reportedly deeply troubled by the situation, feeling that his brother's past behavior and continued controversies were undermining his efforts to stabilize the monarchy and restore public confidence in the institution. The king had been working to present a vision of a modern, accountable royal family, and this scandal represented yet another setback to those efforts. Prince William's reaction was described as even more intense. Sources close to the Prince of Wales suggested that he was incandescent with rage, believing that the scandal had caused irreparable damage to the institution he will one day lead. Prince William had already been pushing for reforms and a more streamlined approach to royal duties, and this situation only strengthened his conviction that dramatic changes were necessary. The idea that his uncle's actions and secrets could continue to harm the monarchy's reputation and legitimacy was reportedly a source of enormous frustration for him. For Alexander Campbell, the confirmation brought a sense of quiet vindication, mixed with the challenge of suddenly being thrust into the global spotlight. A statement from his representatives indicated that now that the facts had been scientifically proven, Mr. Campbell had achieved his only goal, which was to know the truth about his parentage. The statement emphasized that he and his family now wanted privacy and respect as they processed this life-changing information. However, privacy would be difficult to maintain given the enormous public interest in the story. The world immediately began speculating about what would happen next, creating what some commentators described as a crisis of dignity for the monarchy. Legal experts started discussing the complex implications of the confirmation. Under the Royal Marriages Act and the laws governing succession, Mr. Campbell would not automatically receive a royal title or a position in the line of succession because he was born outside of marriage. The concept of legitimacy still carries legal weight in determining who can inherit royal status and privileges. However, some legal analysts suggested that Mr. Campbell might have grounds for a claim against Prince Andrew's personal assets. While he couldn't claim royal titles or a place in the succession, questions about financial support or inheritance from his biological father's estate could potentially be pursued through the courts. These legal questions, while fascinating to constitutional experts, were described by many as secondary to the deeper moral and institutional issues at stake. Dr. Anna Whitelock, the royal historian, pointed out that the monarchy's foundation rests not just on legal structures, but on popular opinion and moral authority. The institution survives and thrives when the public believes in it and supports it. This disaster revealed a long-standing problem within that framework. Contemporary science, with its ability to definitively prove biological relationships, now holds ancient traditions accountable in ways that were never before possible. The traditions and structures of monarchy were developed in an era before DNA testing, before the ability to prove paternity beyond any shadow of doubt. Those traditional structures struggled to cope with modern scientific certainty. Comparisons were immediately drawn to other major royal scandals throughout history. Some observers liken this situation to the divorce of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, with its revelations about infidelity and the breakdown of what was supposed to be a fairy tale marriage. Others compared it to the abdication crisis of Edward VIII, who gave up the throne to Mary Wallis Simpson. However, many experts argued that this situation was fundamentally different from those historical precedents. The core issue here wasn't about love, duty, or choices made in the public eye. It was about alleged deception and abandonment, about moral failings that had been hidden for decades. Moreover, these alleged failings had now been confirmed through undisputed scientific investigation, leaving no room for alternative interpretations or gentle revisionism. The facts were simply the facts, proven by DNA analysis that cannot be argued with or reinterpreted. As the initial shock began to settle, the royal family found itself navigating extremely dangerous and unfamiliar territory. A new member of its bloodline was now publicly known, serving as a living symbol of a secret that the monarchy had been unable to keep hidden. This person represented a challenge to the carefully controlled narrative that the royal family tries to maintain about itself. Prince Andrew, who was once the Queen's beloved second son and a working member of the royal family, had now become a complete pariah. His legacy would be forever marked by scandal, dishonor, and the existence of a son he had never publicly acknowledged, and apparently never had a relationship with. The image of a man who could father a child and then have no involvement in that child's life for over 4 decades was deeply damaging, particularly when combined with all the other controversies that had already surrounded him. The monarchy as an institution would undoubtedly survive this crisis, as it had survived many others throughout its long history. The British royal family has shown remarkable resilience over the centuries, adapting to changing circumstances and weathering storms that might have destroyed less established institutions. However, this particular scandal would leave a deep and permanent mark. It would serve as a reminder that even royal blood, even the privileges and protections that come with being born into one of the world's most famous families, cannot hide the truth in an age of scientific certainty and public demand for accountability. The confirmation of Prince Andrew's paternity of Alexander Campbell represented more than just another scandal. It highlighted the fundamental tension between an ancient institution based on heredity and secrecy and a modern world that values transparency, scientific truth, and personal responsibility. How the royal family navigates this tension in the coming months and years will likely determine much about its future relevance and public support.